Thank you very much for staying until the end of the conference. We have a last official session of our conference. Any questions that haven't been answered, anything that came up to your head last minute about the PPC, we have Rain Johnson, Danny McMILLAN, LIRAN HIRSCHKORN, and Stefano.
HIRSCHKORN. Where were you from?
HIRSCHKORN, HIRSCHKORN, whatever.
He's from Russia.
Yeah, you have those difficult surnames. So any last questions from the audience? We can stay here for 10 minutes, we can stay here for half an hour, but let's make the best use of this time. So anybody wants to fire a question?
Anyone? No? Okay, we'll go to the bar. Ready?
What?
Yeah.
You didn't have enough last night?
Too much. Turn it on?
You guys all own agencies, right? What's your yearly turnover?
Next question.
If you turn it on, press the button, push the tempo. Okay.
Do you want to borrow this one?
Hi, this one, 1, 2, 3, yeah. Okay. So this is related to the number of keywords per ad group that we should all have. I've been asking these questions to a few people, and some agencies, some people say 200, 500, 1,000. Some people say 20, 30. So my question is open to the panel.
Okay. I guess I'll open with that one. I'm sure there's some conflicting opinions you'll get on this, of course, but the way I look at it is we've seen generally on a per product basis that Amazon wants to show advertising for about 150 to 200 keywords. And so generally what we see is it doesn't matter how many keywords you have in an ad group. It's more about how many keywords you have total that you're marketing for a product. And Amazon's going to pick and choose which ones it's going to show based primarily on relevance to the product.
Yep. Down relevance, see if there's too much going on. Stefano?
Whoa, what the hell?
Hey, sorry, Mr. Russian. Let the Russian
You don't
go
see
first.
me sitting here, Danny?
Sorry, we'll let the Russian go first. Apologies. Go on.
What I tend to do is I tend to group my keywords in one campaign, but I will also watch for high volume keywords. So if there's a high volume keyword that's pulling a lot of the budget, and I feel like maybe the other keywords don't get a chance, and I'll separate those out into like some high volume keyword campaigns. I might move them separately, but otherwise I tend to group them together.
As far as what we do, we don't limit the amount of keyword for ad groups. We've done some testing after all this information comes out on Facebook and get echoed all over the freaking internet. And honestly, we couldn't find anything significant. It doesn't matter if it's 5, 10, 20, 50, 100 keywords per ad group. Some gets impressions and not.
I would like to... Is it on? Hello, hello? Yes. Could each of you give your own version or understanding of the quality score that Amazon has?
It's a very broad question, quality score specifically.
I think you're talking about quality score on a campaign level?
There is bid to win the, let's say, top of page placement. Obviously, your bid matters. But there is this unofficial belief that there is a quality score that Amazon is using, perhaps determined by conversion rate. I'm curious to hear what insider stuff you know.
Oh, that'd be handy. We just know all the insider stuff. Should we? You ready?
I'll go first.
Yeah, because nobody can refute it. We should start making stuff up.
Yeah, we can make it all up. Yeah.
What I know about quality score, I don't really call it quality score, but is how the auction worked. Comes from a couple of fire chats that we had with the Amazon team 2 years ago, so it might not be that accurate now, but that's what I based all the software on. What we learn is that there's no campaign quality score or ad group quality score. There is a keyword async pairing quality score. That's mainly based on how you build your listing relevance and how Amazon forecast or model the conversion rate you're going to have for that specific buyer at that specific time, depending on where the buyer was before. What we also learned was that a big lever of a quality score is the CTR, So the better CTR you have, the higher is the likelihood that you will participate and win the auction. Win the auction means winning the impression, not winning the clicks. And that high bidders have a highest chance to overcome this process, and the higher you bid, the more likelihood you have to show up, even though your quality score might not be that great. Or another way you can say this is that even though your quality score is not great, you might participate in the auction, but it's going to cost you more than somebody else that is a higher quality score.
Hi.
Are we still on the same?
I mean,
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
my,
It took forever.
my understanding is that it's the expected conversion, kind of like what Stefano said, and that it's a combination of your click-through rate and the bid. But obviously, Amazon wants relevant offers that they think are going to get clicks and conversion. So to me, that's what's going to impact. But it's not based on any inside knowledge.
I'll give you a data perspective, not putting down as, say, a quality score, but just to give you an example, when we run what we call challenges, so we challenge our clients against our own, right? So we're duplicating, making slight adjustments, run every 24 hours. What we found is if you've got a highly performing campaign history, the impression share takes longer to reach in our newer campaigns. It takes longer if you've got a good sales conversion history. If you're starting again and you've got ones where it's poor performance, the impression share increases a lot faster. The other thing that we've noticed as well is that, for instance, in some campaigns you've got keywords that never seem to have any impressions, right? When you start them in that clone campaign and run those, the impressions start on those keywords, but not on the main keywords if it's got a long, good standing campaign history. So it's almost like the keywords that didn't work before would suddenly start working because they're in a fresh campaign in the opposing campaigns, if that makes sense.
Also, just to jump in, when you're trying to be very aggressive with a keyword or trying to get to top of search, for example, or you're launching, one way to overcome this expected conversion, at least if you're doing like up and down bidding, is to do a high bid and keep it fixed, because then you're not leaving it up to Amazon to decide if to put you up there if you want to be really aggressive and try to get top of search.
Brian?
To concur on some of this. So we've traditionally seen where the campaign, what we call the quality score, is more looked at as a trust score now. But the quality score is based off at the campaign level based on how the ad auction works, where Amazon is filtering out the total list of advertisers, and they're making decisions as far as to shrink that large list down into smaller and smaller lists. They're making choices based off of qualification to run ads, relevance based off the search terms that the shoppers are using. Then they're looking at the metrics of the campaigns, including click-through rate, total clicks, age of campaign. That's more of a traditional set of metrics. And then they may use, say, conversion rate as a tiebreaker if there's kind of a tie between competing ads. One of the things that has made a difference on that is when Amazon introduced the dynamic bidding and the placement options, is we found that one of the common practice, I don't know if that was Casey, if you had come to market with that, news on that first or not, as far as the 900, the 1/9 900%, and a lot of people jumped on that, and we had a lot of feedback from those early experiments when it was first published. And one of the things that was counterintuitive, but that we ended up testing, was for established campaigns, the 1/9 900% kind of placement amplification would work well. But if it was a newer campaign or a brand new campaign, Amazon didn't have the trust, would basically filter you out because you had such a low bid. You'd never make it to the 900%. You'd never make it to the amplification. And so if you had a low trust because it was a new campaign, you'd get 0 impressions. And so it still kind of falls into play, is that Amazon creates some kind of a trust score that they're using in the ad auction, and they've complicated it a little bit more by the dynamic bidding and the placement.
That's very specific. That was good. Any other questions?
Oh yes, I have one.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now we're in a beautiful European country, and this is first European PPC conference. So, but I didn't actually hear from anybody during this conference the approach towards European marketplaces, and there are 5 of them, and we are selling in Europe, and we have to do everything separately because each marketplace has its own specifics, has its own competition level, has its own culture and a language. That's very important. And I would like to hear from you any advice for European sellers how to handle 5 separate marketplaces in terms of PPC management. And especially because you're presenting more of the American one. And I would like to hear something for European sellers.
I might not answer what you expect from me. I would say start selling in US, and once you make,
we are.
make enough money there.
We have 7 marketplaces, and just so difficult
so
to manage
so
all
at
of
that
it.
point is Pareto, which Brian said at the beginning. You know, if it's worth your while, then it's worth it. Find a way to push through it. If it's not worth it, which it wasn't for us, we left the marketplaces. But then it goes back to, you know, perhaps a tool might be a good option for you, whatever tool you pick, just to help you in processing all those 5 additional daily tasks or monthly or weekly tasks.
Yeah, my answer was going to be using software, right? Because obviously you have different languages. If you're using if you're using software, you can run an auto campaign, right, and pull keywords off that, or put in even suggested keywords from Amazon and pull that data and then move that data into manual. I mean, you can run campaigns in Japan, any country really, without knowing the language if you're using software tools.
Brian, do you want to go? Or?
Yeah, I just had 2 points on this.
Go on.
One is any marketplace, doesn't matter if it's European, any marketplace, is that we do look for blue ocean opportunities where we might have, say, a client product that there's very few competitors in another market. That market might be known to only have, like, say, 5% of the volume of a large market, for instance. But if there's only a few competitors, you're likely to have a much larger market share, and therefore it's worth your while to go into for that product on the individual market. That applies to any marketplace you go into. 2 is when it comes to translation, we use native in-country translators. We don't use any kind of translation software. We certainly don't use Amazon translated listings. We use, in-country translators who understand the language, understand the culture, so that we can match up the relevance and we can align the keywords that we're targeting based off of locality.
So I'll give you because obviously we've got European clients and US as well. The key things I've found, is this mic on?
No.
Can you hear? 1, 2. Can you hear me? Is that okay? It's clear. Okay. Okay. Turn it down below the Russian. That's the problem. Yeah. So
Don't skip me over next time.
look, see how loud he is. Can you turn him down? Yeah. I'm joking. Sorry. Sorry. No, let me answer this question. So a few key points here. Firstly, the biggest problem that most people have is when they move out the US marketplace, come to the EU, they think their product is ubiquitous, right? They get there and then they don't sell in sleepy Spain or, quiet Italy and stuff like that. And they may just do well in Germany and the UK, which is fine. So it goes back to the 80-20 rule. You look at the markets, where you're going to work out where your products are going to work. Then you need to get your listings done, translated properly. So then you handpick the top 5% performers and test those first, because the biggest problem people do is they go and use a cheap translation company, the listings are shit, and then what happens is they won't convert. So, and what people do is they throw all their listings up, ready to go, and go, okay, let's go in and start work. And they're clueless about the language as well, so that it's going to kill everything they plan to do. So I would always say to them, go one listing per marketplace that we think is going to do well with some pre-research.
Danny, do you have a recommended? I know there's several translation companies for Europe marketplaces. Do you have one?
Yeah, I think Yana is one of them, which is Lazar's partner.
What's the name of the company?
What's the name of the company? Lazar, sorry. Huh?
Well, cheap translations.
Yeah, that's one, and the other one escapes me, but I can share it into the Facebook group and give you some details on that. The other thing about the European marketplace, again, we've got our own technology. We focus on multi-language PPC. You can only do it to a point, right? The good thing with my partner Ellis, he's fluent in German. He's based in the Black Forest, and his family are all born and raised in Germany. And because that's one of the lead markets, it makes it a lot easier for us. But the most common thing we do see, we'll take on a new client. We just had one just recently, and the listings are horrendous. And then we go through them, and they're just not functional. They're not fit for work. So the biggest step first, find the right translation company, especially where Germans are very picky, right? And they're not going to have any nonsense. They're not like the UK or the US. The UK and the US, you can be a bit more blasé with bits and pieces, but Germans will own your arse if you don't have the right type of product. You can turn these reviewers into pen pals and everything else, but they're very specific. They demand a high level of service and demand. And if your listings are poor, they're not going to pay any attention to them. Yeah, so first things first, translate exactly what needs to be done, one listing at a time per country. Then you'd run your tests on that, and as you start to generate revenue in the markets, then you start adding more and more listings behind it.
Yeah, I was more asking about the PPC management.
Yeah.
Is there any hacks how to do this quicker than just do it separately? Because it sounds like a lot of work at one marketplace.
Yeah,
and
but this is why you pick your markets. You've got to find out whether, you might come to Europe and you go, okay, I'm just going to do Germany, because that's where, my product works there. Or you don't bother. The problem is everyone goes into these markets, they dump, like they spray and pray, and then they wonder why it doesn't work. So you have to be ultra focused before you do anything else. Just take a pause. But translation, then after that, you can use software because you'll get away with software to a point based on a rules-based system or whatever it is, but you don't have that intelligence of a human being, who understands the cultural differences, the dialect of the language and all those different things. You don't get that. I mean, you can use like spreadsheets, and you can use Google Auto Translate to get an idea of like, would that word
that's what
work?
I'm doing.
But it's not good enough. It's simply not good enough. And then you find it hard. Like, well, what do I do then? I have to keep hiring a translator to then review the PPC campaign. So it kind of get a bit messy. I mean, Brent Zaradnik there, he's a guy you should have a chat with because he's got a multi-language team in Europe, and this is one of his focal points. So.
Okay, so you should just hire more people, like native people
No, you just need to focus. Don't launch all the stuff. That's the problem. Don't launch all the products. Only launch the ones that's going to make enough money to make it worth your time to bother doing.
Yeah, start with the product that has the highest conversion rate, that has the best chance in the new market.
And then work back.
Yeah.
One thing I will add to consider is that although you can actually translate your listings, you can only choose one image across all marketplaces unless you actually create different products across the marketplaces. So then you say that people are picky, and if you present an Italian with a German infographic, he's not going to understand what's there, and most likely not even English. I'm speaking for the Italians. So my advice would be find a way to have each marketplace not just localized the listing, but localize the images.
Yeah. Can I add on this point as well? I know Jana Lazarov, second half, who is doing a wonderful job translating the listings. But before you get into translations, what you should consider is doing actual keyword research in that language, because translating word for word doesn't work. And
go on, mate. You sell it.
Why I can answer this question? That's to give you my credibility. I run a translation agency for 10 years, but we don't focus on Amazon. So I'm not trying to sell you my services, but we did a project recently for Guinness Storehouse, and they did like a multiple campaign across European languages. And it was really interesting project to work. And I actually realized that translation hasn't to do anything with the keywords that people were actually searching for. So that's probably the first step I would recommend from my language background, is actually do the keyword research, and then translation should adapt the research. And they're kind of working a little bit one step prior to that.
But then you get back into the dialect thing, and understanding the culture as well plays a massive role. Yeah. Any other questions, guys? Oh, there we go. Sorry, the first
one. Well, it doesn't work, but I speak a little bit louder. Just when you mentioned it about the pictures, maybe for you or for the audience, if you want to join the Pan-EU program, you can't have separate listings or in each country, and therefore you can't have different. I mean, only if you have different listing in each country, you have different images. But you, in terms of efficiency, you want to have Pan-EU. But then on the downside, people in Italy and Spain and France don't like to have an English text on the images. So if anybody has an idea how to solve this problem.
There are ways around that. So the first way is, well, since you're Pan-EU, you are obviously registered for VAT across all the countries. So why don't you create different inventories and you do different shipments, if that makes sense for you. If the localization of images is so important, then it will make sense to have different inventories at each country, because anyways you're registered for VAT. But before going that, you can go in a in-between stage for which you actually create MFN listings. So you actually do create new self-fulfilled, merchant-fulfilled listings, which are with different images because they're not anymore part of Pan-European, and you can test it. So you can actually sell and advertise the MFN with the localized images, and you can see the difference. And if that makes a huge difference, at that point, it might make sense to, just put the inventory in German for German people.
So for clarity, so I understand that's a good little hack. You're doing them by merchant fulfilled, right?
Yep.
With a different ASIN.
With a
different ASIN,
yeah.
merchant fulfilled, which it could be a variation. It could be a variation of your Pan-European.
Great. So basically, what you're doing is because they're creating a new ASIN, we're no longer working with that centralized database.
Correct. You receive the MFN order, and then you still fulfill it Pan-European manually.
That's good.
You see, at least you test, and the theory that if we have better images, localized infographics, you will get better conversion rate.
Yeah.
And if that makes sense, then you roll it out.
That's a good hack.
We'll take one question from this side. I actually felt that this side hasn't been very active, but nothing to blame you. So you get a chance to ask a few questions. Come on.
Hi guys. How do you go for launching a product for PPC on the market that you have never been before, and you just start with new listings? Basically, how you go for the product launch for PPC?
Aggressive bids, fixed aggressive bids. Phrase match, exact match. We'll start with that. That's kind of the good basics, yeah.
I think you want to. I don't know if it's on. I think you want to be aggressive, right? Because new ASINs we know are easier to rank. So whether that means I'll do auto, broad, phrase, exact, all match types. Just be very, very aggressive. Run it for at least, run it for a week. Be very aggressive. Run a reverse ASIN on your listing, see what keywords you're ranking for, and then see if you need to give them another push with some kind of launch, search, find, buy type of campaign. Also, you want to get reviews through this process so that you can kind of maintain the rankings once you get them.
We have two more questions from this side.
What's your process for moving high volume and high converting keywords from your general campaigns, broad, phrase, exact, to your specified separate campaigns? What's your process for moving a keyword that's converting from a campaign with a huge list of keywords to a separate campaign? What's the adaptation period? Do you pause the keyword? Do you delete it immediately?
You're referring to as far as transitioning keyword migration versus keyword match testing?
Not testing.
Okay, I'm not a fan of keyword migration.
You just leave it here.
Leave it the same
So in other words, I don't migrate from broad to phrase to exact and leave it in exact because I don't want to leave 80% of my sales on the table. I actually want to have the actual sales that I have. So I'll actually test it in phrase and exact match, and certainly test it in exact match, maybe with a more aggressive bid. If the exact match actually picks up the traffic, picks up the conversions, then I'll continue to run with it. But sometimes when it doesn't, then I'll go back to the other match type, which performs better as far as sales.
Let's say we have this example. We have one keyword where we're ranking number 2, and we have one ASIN which ranks number 1, and we get 80% of the sales from that ASIN. But the ASIN and the keyword are in the exact campaign and in the huge campaign with all the ASIN lists. So you would not recommend us, even though we know that's highly performing keyword, you recommend us not move that keyword to a separate campaign for higher exposure.
You're saying when it's already an exact.
Yeah, it's
you've already
exact.
tested it in all three match types, and you figured out exact is performing well for that.
So just leave it there.
It goes back to campaign history as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's going to depend on your campaign age as far as whether or not you've got your destination campaign is well established and has similar metrics. Then you can get away with transitioning that over. I wouldn't do a big batch of keywords at once. I would, trickle it over. If in that situation, like for instance, one of the processes that we do now is more of we'll do research testing in broad and phrase, and then we'll shift over to phrase and exact as more of the destination, I guess.
And let's say you want to move that one keyword. Like, do you move it and then pause it in the exact campaign?
I move, observe, and then
so you
handle
observe
the previous
both keywords are active, and then after like a week or two, you pause it in the previous campaign.
Because if Amazon chooses for whatever reason not to move it for campaign, for trust, quality score, age, whatever the case is, if they choose not to transfer those sales over, then you just turned off the sales in the process. So what I'll do is I'll move it over, be more aggressive on the bid, or reduce the bid a little bit on the previous location. If it does transfer the sales over to the new location, then I'll go ahead and reduce the bid or pause the old location.
Okay.
I think part of your question is on search term isolation was part of what you're asking. And some people will move, like when you move a keyword from auto to a manual campaign, will negate it. Like Brian said, I personally don't do that because that new campaign, new keyword just may not get the impressions or for whatever reason. And if you just negated it in the other campaign, you're kind of killing both options. So I tend, when I do, when I take a search term from a broad keyword into, let's say, phrase and exact, I'll have all three now running, the original broad keyword and the new match types.
I have nothing to add. Stefano?
We have one question.
I have a question about reporting. I'm seeing on a very large account a significant disconnect between the campaign manager data and search term report data for the same date range. The numbers don't add up with maybe a 5% error margin.
We got an email a couple of days ago from the API team to say that's been fixed. I don't know whether that means it's fixed for you.
Do you know where the error was, whether it was on the campaign dashboard side or the search term side?
In all honesty, I don't know. It's just I spoke to Ellis the other day because I know that Brent went on a rampage about it, didn't you? And he was going everywhere. And then I spoke to Ellis. I said, what was your conclusion of that? He said, the API team sent an email to say they had an error and they've done a refresh. And that's as far as I'm aware. I don't know the improvements.
That was primarily to the API. So, I mean, the disconnect between data on different reporting platform API has always been an issue for as long as I've been on Amazon. So what's been explained to me on that is, look, we have different data centers. We have different servers where the data is being stored. It gets synced between the different data, between the different servers that support the different, support campaign managers, support the campaign level, support the advertising report, support the API 1, 2, 3, whatever version. And none of them, they don't sync at the same time. They sync at different times during the day. They don't always, they certainly don't always match up. It's kind of like a known entity. We were talking about earlier as far as with our agencies, we've got access to a couple of different API access. Now, if it's the same API, and you make the exact same request for the same account, for the same date period, for the same ad type, those should be exactly the same, and they're not.
Is there one place you trust more, or just you always use the same source for your data, so whether it's right or wrong, it's always consistent from the
use
source?
It with a grain of salt, I guess, and just kind of make, you got to, obviously you're trying to make decisions off of loose data. Generally what we have to do is it's a best effort that we can do. Ultimately, over time, it should average out as far as how you make your decisions. If you're working on, minute by minute, hour by hour kind of change, bid changes, If you've got something that's hyper automated, for instance, then you might run into some challenges there because of data delays and data inconsistencies. But over time, you should see averaging, and so you should continue to trend up in your performance as long as you're paying attention each week, for instance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We take another question from here.
Actually, thanks you guys. I learned a lot these 2 days. And I don't really have a question. I just want to refer back to the European image issue. Actually, there is a solution for it. Okay, and I talked because I went to the Pan EU last week from in London, and then our account manager said, "Yeah, you can do it." Okay, and then it's a manual process. She will be doing it. So she said it's only 20 ASIN maximum. She allowed me to do 20 ASIN maximum. Okay, so if you do have this issue, you want to have different images in different marketplace, talk to your Pan EU manager. They have a solution for it, but it's not open. Okay, so
is that just for anyone who's in Pan EU, or are they in the growth program?
I don't know. She was my Pan EU
Yeah,
manager.
are you in the growth program? Do you pay for an account?
No,
manager?
I'm not in growth program.
So
just a Pan EU. Yeah.
Yes, Pan EU.
Yeah.
That's going to get abused next week once people hear about that.
But just they do have a software internally, but it's a manual job. She said she doesn't want to do that.
I'll cut this bit. I won't put it on the podcast yet.
What's the person's name and their email address and their phone number?
Yeah. What's your account manager's name? We can look it up. Do a reverse look up on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Well, I don't know how many Pan EU manager, but you just. I think you just talk to the one you have.
She won't be thanking you next week. Yeah.
Oh well, just don't mention it then.
That was really good insight. Brent, you would like to ask something, or Ed?
Don't show us up, Brent.
This is maybe a tough one. So, advertising clicks counted as sessions or not inside of business reports? No, I don't know the answer.
You always get one. They want to troll you, don't they, with a question that we don't have the answer to.
I'm going to give the same answer I gave for the mismatched API. It's just Amazon. No, there's so I've actually seen just recently like 2 or 3 different explanations from internal staff, all conflicting with each other as far as how that counted. This has kind of been going on for years, in that some say it does, some say it doesn't, some say it's because it depends on where the traffic comes into the listing and how it gets counted. So I don't rely on sessions. It's just more of a reference point. And I usually, a lot of the metrics that we're looking at, whether it's ad impressions or sessions, it's how is it relative to the rest of the products in the portfolio that I'm working with. So I know which one's strong, which one's weak as far as overall sessions. I can't count on any specific metric to be so precise that I can make a critical business decision on. It's just kind of relative. It's probably a cop-out, but...
I mean, why would you think they wouldn't be counted as sessions?
Because you can have higher...
Clicks than sessions?
Clicks than sessions.
Yeah.
All right. The last question from Mr.
I want to ask something, actually. What about the session percentage? Does that include PPC and organic?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you can figure it out.
So it should include sessions that are from advertising
so
as well.
you can compute it out, because assuming that the session percentage
logically
is
it
true,
does, but
you compute it out and you figure out. I never tried it, and I don't know the answer to what you asked, but could compute it and see if they match.
I've never seen a match.
All right, thank you, boys. We have one more last question from Mr. Selix.
So not really a question, just a clarification actually on the API issues. Amazon had an issue in the month of August, and the search term report was accurate. The other reports had an issue. So if you're using a service provider, they must have pulled the other reports again. If you're using your own API stuff, rely on the search term report or pull it again. Yeah, that's about it.
He's been a bit quiet. Are you from Selix? Didn't even know these guys were here.
Wow. It's all right. Thank you very much.
So are we wrapping up this session?
Wrapping up. So the big boys were rehearsing a last dance last night.
We ready?
Are you performing now?
Yeah.
All right.
Ready to dance?
The PPC dance, we're gonna call it.
PPC dance. I can tell.
So I'm gonna sit there.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's a tribal dance. Yeah.
You didn't prepare your workshop pitch, but you prepared the dance? Great.
You need to give me a script and you know me to counter
Yeah.
sign and agree.
So you have something where
Corrado,
it's
you got to focus on one thing.
Okay. All right. So
Let's give them a big round of applause for.
Perfect. So.